Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, this morning we got a new drought monitor map, and remember something about the drought monitor here. The data that go into this are valid through Tuesday of each week, but it's released on the Thursday. And what's important about that is that when you look across the United States, we did kind of set a new record here with the drought monitor. And what I'm referencing here is if you look at the time series for the whole United States, we currently, right over here in the end, are at 84.5% of the land area covered in some form of drought. And historically, since the drought monitor began, this current version of the drought monitor, in the year 2000, that's kind of the greatest land area in the United States covered in drought. Now, why I bring up the fact that it was released, the data was processed through Tuesday, is that since then we've had quite a bit of rainfall in the midsection of the country and also quite a bit here in coastal parts of the Pacific Northwest, and even some snow that came into the Rocky Mountains. And so some of the rain from this first system that rolled through here, remember there was a front, and behind the front the low kind of followed it, and that's what brought the severe weather on, Monday here into Texas. All right, parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, we saw better than 3 inches, and some heavy rain did press further north into Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. So I just want to show you that. And what's good about this is we kind of put a dent in the soil moisture problem we've been having throughout the Mississippi Basin. So you can see this area right in through here, seeing a pretty big change. But before we just take another look at what's going on with the Mississippi River, I just want to give you the stats for kind of the longer term fall time period. So this goes from September 1 until the 26th of October. And again, we just see how many of our climate districts here have been so very dry. I've had a lot of focus lately just on parts of Oklahoma and Kansas, and then getting farther north into Nebraska, the Dakotas, and Iowa, Minnesota, just through this corridor, especially down into Kansas, given where we're wanting to be with respect to moisture in the winter wheat crop and how each system seems to miss it. We just tend to get better precipitation farther to the east, given the current trajectory of these lows. And I do expect to continue to see improvement farther to the south, down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. And with the whole pattern change we discussed over the last several weeks, we're going to be seeing much better chances across the whole of the United States for precipitation, except for possibly down in the southeast. I'll give you more about that in just a few seconds. But I did want to take you to the latest AHPS data. This is from water.weather.gov, and we're going to come right in here and look at the Mississippi River in fact, let's get the Memphis one. There we go. And just to point out that it's going to take a while for that water that came in to get into the main river system. So you can see here that we're still at about, 13, 14 feet below the low stage. And the forecast, which is how the line kind of changes from today all the way through the 9th, doesn't really come up too much despite better precipitation. Just a point to make here that it takes a while for large river systems to recover. But we're up about a foot over where we kind of hit our bottom on the 20th. So, big question I want to ask at the beginning of this video is, looking at the last 30 days, we were quite dry in the west, very dry in the Pacific Northwest until just lately. We had some wetter conditions in Montana and down in the southwest here, but very dry, like from the front range of the Rockies all the way here over to the Appalachian Mountains. And what's wet over in this side of the country was primarily from Ian, which of course was back in September. Now the change you saw here was just from the recent rainfall that came through. But overall, this large area that's been so dry, I want to know how well it was forecast. Because you know that I rely pretty heavily on these European weekly forecasts to give an idea, to paint a pattern, to kind of assess what we expect given the current setup. And if I'm going to build trust in a model like that, I'd like to at least show you its verification. So I went back to the beginning of September when these stats go back to, and this is what the model was forecasting. So what we're going to look at here is the performance of the model beginning on the 1st of September, looking at the 46-day forecast for precipitation anomalies. Now this only goes through September 17th, but I wanted to take you back to the beginning of September. And model did a great job picking up on the overall pattern. Where it struggled was down south, right along the Gulf of Mexico. One of the big reasons for that was the beginning of September, we were starting to see a few things change that made it look as though we were going to be bringing in more tropical systems. I think the model was just trying to pick up on that overall pattern shift. But outside of along the Gulf Coast, the model did a very good job on this. Now, I'd like to talk just a moment about the tropics. And what I want to do is I want to first show you that right now we do have a couple areas we're keeping an eye on. National Hurricane Center's kept this at 40% all day for the risk of some tropical depression formation. And there is a feature in the Caribbean that right now is going to be moving basically towards Central America over the next 5 to 10 days. Neither of them are a threat to the United States at this point, but just wanted to bring that up. Now, I'll be the first to confess that all spring and summer, my forecast for the strength of this hurricane season was that it had a much higher probability of being above average than anything else. We were watching a strong La Niña at that point. We were anticipating lower wind shear, and given the ocean temperatures in the Atlantic, it looked as though, should systems be capable of forming, that they were going to be stronger and last longer and possibly even have more of the triggers to create them. But looking back, we can now see where the forecast went wrong. And part of that was seen in this graphic, and this is just part of the story. This is tropical Atlantic vertical wind shear. Now remember, hurricanes cannot handle high wind shear environments. It spreads out their heating, it disrupts the vortex, and it just tends to shear them apart. They typically thrive in very low shear environments. So when the environment showed low shear this year was at the end of June and at the end of July. But during those two time periods when the shear values really dropped off, we had a lot of very dry and dusty air that was coming off of the Saharan desert. And we did not have the position of the subtropical ridge over the Atlantic in the right spot to be allowing for those easterly waves off of Africa to really evolve. So it's very poor timing. We then got into the month of August and wind shear increased dramatically. And that really kind of stopped any system from getting going. When we got into the month of September, even though the shear dropped off, the position of the ridge that sat over the western United States dug a deep trough over the east. And what happened here is that up along the east coast and Gulf Coast, with the exception of the time period that Ian formed, the shear was bad. Now remember, this is for the whole tropical Atlantic, but it just kind of shows us, how a season is pretty delicate in terms of what can happen in wind based upon these few parameters. Now, we all thought that because of La Niña, we were going to see a really active season. And I'm going to talk to you more about this La Niña, because right now, when you look at the ocean temperatures across any of our Niño regions, from 1+2 to 3 and out here to 3.4 and 4, every one of these areas continues to maintain and even at times get cooler. We've seen very strong trade winds that have come out of the tropical Atlantic. I draw this a lot, tropical Pacific, like this, and the strong westerly wind bursts have been like that. But there's some subtle changes in this we're going to discuss. I think that'd be important to the forecast. But first, the long-term changes. I'm going to continue to show you this until it changes. And what it is just the CFS V2 forecast. That's NOAA's flagship model on the seasonal forecasting side. And I just would like to make a point that it continues to show La Niña having a grip on the pattern, being the dominant teleconnection through the end of October and November. But then we need to be watching it in December and really watching it after the beginning of the new year, because the model continues with all of its ensemble members here to forecast and into this La Niña. And I just want to bring up a couple of areas of support for this we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. We continue to see, remember this is that QBO feature I talked about, we continue to see that in the upper troposphere, lower stratosphere, westerly winds are evolving. So we're having descending westerly winds, and we talked about how that's correlated with an end to a La Niña event. So global angular momentum is up because of that one feature. That's just an indicator. But I do want to point out that when you look at this animation, which goes from South America on this side to Australia on this side and then down in the ocean, 450 meters, there's still quite a bit of cooler water here that's going to surface. And that means even if the trade winds start to let go, we don't anticipate this warm water sloshing back immediately. So you'll probably still see cold water across the equatorial Pacific, even when I'm talking about La Niña letting its grip go. And that's simply because of the way the pattern is currently set up here again. Now, this will be another graphic we'll watch carefully, because as soon as you start to see these warmer waters spread their way back across the open Pacific, that is when we're getting the full ocean response in all of this. Okay, in the meantime, we still have our stronger trade winds in the blue-green. That's from today all the way through the 11th of November, and here's our westerly winds. What's changed, I mentioned this a few moments ago, is that the strength of these westerly winds is really moving farther to the east. And we're still meeting them up with some stronger trades here. And that means we're going to get a lot of MJO Phase 6 and 7, something we've talked quite a bit about. And just as a reminder of that, MJO Phase 6 and 7, which as you can see, that's where the current European model's forecasting this to be, tends to give us a lot of troughs that kind of originate somewhere south of the Bering Sea over the Aleutian Islands in this area. And what that means is, without having a major blocking setup there, we tended to send systems into the northwest. They come across Northern California. They eject over the mountains. This is what an active pattern looks like when it begins in the Pacific. So with all of that as a background, knowing that we've been trusting the European model, here's the latest forecast. Now this goes from November 7th to December 7th, and it looks very similar to previous forecasts. What it's showing you is that the momentum being carried out of the North Pacific following the jet stream pattern will likely increase the chances of having a wet start to the new water year here in the West. And we're really going to see this showing up now and in November as well. This also means that we could see more frequent subtropical ridging in this area. And because of that, the model has gone over dry. Now, because I've seen lately the trajectory of these systems, I don't think it's going to be as dry as this may make it look. But this will mean tighter fall application windows, and for the harvest that still needs to be done in the midsection of the country, we'll have tighter windows there as well. Okay, one of the things I do want to make a comment on is the latest drought outlook that was released on October 20th by the CPC. I do definitely agree with the relief of the drought in the Northwest, given what we're seeing right now with the behavior of La Niña. I actually do not see the midsection of the country having drought persist. Well, let me say that again. Not just persist, but getting worse. I think we're actually going to see some improvement in the drought in this area and also down south into Texas. And I would also just make an argument that even though they're claiming that there could be some drought development likely here, which based on the current setup and the history of La Niña, this is a very solid forecast. I'm only being critical because it's important to be critical, but I'm telling you, the CPC and NOAA, they are top. Without them, there's no me. Does that make sense? Those guys are fantastic at what they do. I'm just looking at it, given my own opinion of it. And one of the reasons I'm saying that is because this La Niña's flavor, as we've kind of been calling it, is just starting to shift that better rising motion farther over into the Pacific Ocean. And so therefore, the history of La Niñas being dry across the south in fall may not play out this year. But I know why NOAA is giving us that outlook, and it makes sense to me. But I think it looks too dry. So we'll watch it carefully. I could definitely be wrong. I'm pretty good at being wrong too. So we'll watch this all together. Okay, in the near term, let's talk about that. We'll finish up with South America in a little bit here. This is what an open and flowing polar branch of the jet stream looks like. We're still missing the subtropical branch, but that could be a feature that develops late this winter. That's going to be critical for California. So we have one piece riding into the Pacific Northwest, and then we have this. This is kind of our little cutoff close low. And I've been watching it all day on satellite. And take a look at this. There's the sun setting here over the East Coast. Let's go back here and watch this from this morning. That's a tight little circulation right there. And it's diving into New Mexico all day. And one of the things I noticed this morning when I was working on some content for Cotton Incorporated was that there was this neat feature that came out of this southern part of New Mexico. And I zoomed in on it. I want to show you what it's doing. Just to show you how energetic this wave is, this one right here. Take a look at this cirrus cloud shield. Now, it is coming off of the mountains down here. And what I watched all day is that it made it from this part of New Mexico just after sunrise all the way over. You watching it with me? It's all the way over here and gets into southern Illinois and eventually into western Kentucky. So it went from here to there throughout the day, and that's moving. And I was impressed by this, so I went ahead and calculated it. That's moving at about 160 miles an hour. So this is a very energetic wave that's coming through here, and there's plenty of shear. And one of the things we're concerned about is just at the end of this animation, you're starting to see some of the cells pop up right here. And what we're worried about today is that that's where the Storm Prediction Center has had this identified. There's plenty of wind shear here, and the system curling through. We could be watching for some strong storms tonight. Tomorrow, on the 28th, that kind of moves a bit farther to the east, and then when you get into the 29th, possibly parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley. Let's go look at today's high-res NAM model to kind of get a sense. There we go, the 18Z just came in. Perfect. So what we're watching this evening is for storms to pop here. And in the overnight hours, there could be some discrete supercells given that wind shear. And that's going to press east through Texas in the overnight hours into tomorrow morning. So this is tomorrow morning on Friday. Now that low curls through Texas, producing some locally very heavy rainfall throughout the day on Friday. And you're going to watch again on Friday night for the risk of strong to severe storms to be in this corridor. Then we see going through the early morning on Saturday and getting out there through midday on Saturday, and then Saturday evening that the low begins to curl through the lower Mississippi River Valley and starts to move up toward the Ohio River Valley. And this has been very well forecast by the models as doing this. Now, since I'm talking about where this is all going to go, though, remember, the origin of these storm systems is happening right in this area. So take a look. There's that shortwave. It dives through and then comes out right here by the time we get into Sunday, and that's where this first system starts to lift. But watch, here is the next trough diving down on Sunday into Monday and Tuesday into the western United States. So you see the origin of these storm systems here, and they push in to the west there. Now what this means is that next week under this ridge, major warm-up is forecast, and this trough digs in, and it's going to be far enough south to deliver precipitation to California. And that is going to dig far enough south, and there's the possibility of this, that it gets cut off over Southern California, and the polar branch zips over the top of it. And that's going to leave this here, lingering, sitting, and spinning. And that could set us up for a very wet week 2 in the midsection of the country, right in through here. Now that's important, because if this manifests itself in the way we're seeing, that could actually return some moisture to the places that desperately need it in the midsection of the country. Now, I've been focusing a lot lately on the European model. I just want to explain to you why. My friend Ryan Maui, I love it that he makes this graphic. It tells us the performance of the models, and I've shown it to you before. But as of late, the European has been basically several percentage points more accurate in matching the pattern than the GFS. So I've been sticking a lot with the European, and this is what it's currently saying. Here's today's 12Z run. So we've already seen through Sunday morning, right about here. Okay, so here's the lead low, and it moves through the Ohio River Valley, and it spreads rain over the Appalachian Mountains to the mid-Atlantic and starts to pull this moisture into New England. It's not much, but it's pulling some of that moisture into that area. Now after that, after it passes through, harvest weather in this area is still open. What I'm watching is next Monday for the trough to dig out. Look at that. Look how deep this digs. Such that by Monday night through the day on Tuesday, and then getting out here to Wednesday, we could be packing up some snow in the mountains in the Sierra Nevada, in the Great Basin, and then up in the northern Rockies here. So this next system is really pushing pretty far to the south. So first really meaningful rainfall and snow coming to California and Nevada. Now what I mentioned was the low kind of gets cut off, right? So that by next Thursday, it sits there and spins, and that's when we start to open up the Gulf Thursday through Friday and Saturday to return moisture farther west. We haven't seen that happen. So this is where we start to see these better chances of getting moisture farther to the north. Now, given a cutoff low here, the likelihood of seeing strong to severe storms in the midsection of the country getting out there, again, we're 9 days out, 10 days out in the forecast. It's there, and I want you to watch it with me, okay? But no slowdown in the action for the Pacific Northwest. So how much precip are we talking about? Well, the first system pulls through. Let's just stop it there. So this is number 1. And you can see the heaviest rains are in and around the Red River Valley of the South down into this part of Texas. So maybe upwards of 2 inches of rain, maybe more. That pulls on to the east. We then see the next one. See it diving down here into California. That would be next Tuesday, Wednesday. And then that system comes out. Now look, at the very end of this, it starts to pull more of that moisture over parts of Kansas. And I'm going to watch that carefully. Let's look at it another way. This is the probability over the next 10 days of getting an inch of precip. And what changed between the first model run today, the 0Z, and now the 12Z is we've increased these amounts here. But take a look, California, Pacific Northwest, very wet along the coastal ranges here. But this is going to be our wettest spot on the eastern side of the Rockies. From there, like I said, the pattern still favors more of these troughs originating here and then moving. And as a result of that, the pattern stays open and flowing. And that's why the week 2 outlook shows wetter in the west, systems ejecting off of the Rocky Mountains and rolling this way. And the only reason why it's drier here is because the models keep putting some sense of ridging in that area. But we will still likely see fronts slide through, bringing precipitation into this region here. All right. But that's the number 1 thing I'm watching for the midsection of the country. Okay, from here, let's talk temperatures, because so far this month, it was very cold east and very hot west. Well, we know we've broken that down, and we're really starting to see a pretty significant change in the pattern. So this was today's high temperatures. We've already seen these. Let's go to tomorrow. Quite a bit of cold air moving through Texas behind that upper level low, but watch the warmth come across the northern interior of the country into the Canadian prairie. That's Saturday, getting into Sunday, and Monday, and Tuesday. Now remember, on Tuesday, that's when the trough is diving to California. The heat comes out ahead of it as the ridge builds, and we go back into these temperatures that are 10 to 15 degrees above normal as the next system kind of comes rolling through. Now we kind of have been saying that's what the pattern's going to look like for a while. So this is our 5-day window of temperature anomalies from the 12Z European Ensemble. As they play it out there into that first full week of November, you can really see how that pattern's setting up with quite a bit of warm air in this area. As we keep playing this forward, that pattern doesn't really break down too much because I think the MJO is going to favor that phase 7 look, and this is what you end up getting out of it. All right, that's the United States. Let's turn our attention to South America. Looking at the 2-month drought severity index from the Standard Precipitation Index, we can see how very dry things have been in parts of Argentina. This is Buenos Aires province, and some places there we're having record dryness. Now, when I look at the NDVI values from Buenos Aires, we can see that currently, see the red line down here? It is the lowest NDVI values for spring going back over the last 20 years. So it's down here. And if we click off of that and come over toward Cordoba, you can see that they're well below their average and they're well below where they were in 21-22. And what about one more place to check? How about Santa Fe? Still below average and kind of matching what they were last year. So our drought issues across Argentina are very real. I just wanted to show you some of the data. Now I was watching today because the monsoon is very healthy north. We've had the first of 2 fronts I'm watching very carefully move through. Now this one yesterday and on Tuesday did deliver some rain into Buenos Aires, which is here. And the main frontal boundary is there, and this is all convection associated with the monsoon. What's interesting is front number 2 is coming through. You ready? And as we play this out, look at this cold anomalies that are going to show up for that first week of November in parts of southern Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, northern Argentina. Temperatures could be, we're down here 10 degrees Celsius below normal. I've been looking, and at this point, I still don't see a risk of frost on major farmland. Could it be at higher elevations? Certainly, but not on the major farmland here. It's just a cold week ahead. But there is some moderation as we get out past the first week, and we get some warmth coming back after that. What does the precipitation look like? Well, here's the new ECMWF 15-day outlook on precipitation anomalies. And we're still very dry in parts of southern Brazil and Argentina. This is associated with the front we just talked about, but also some drier days coming up here for parts of Mato Grosso and north. And the reason for this is when that front comes through, it actually clears all the way to the Amazon. So that's coming later on this weekend into early next week, that big front that blasts through here. And that's why you see some drier signal there. What is interesting is that the latest update, the 46-day outlook, so that's now all the way until the 12th of December, does not let go of the major dry risks in southern Brazil. We'll continue to see a fast plant north. It'll finish up by that time as well, but very, very dry in southern Brazil. The models keep kind of doubling down on that forecast. That's typical of phase 7 MJO. That's typical of a La Niña start to their growing season. We just have to watch it carefully. And one last thing just to bring up, I've been trying to keep you aware of what's going on in Australia. The month-to-date rainfall anomalies still in that 100 to 200 plus millimeter range. But maybe another way to look at this is just to show you the same thing, but let's look at the percentages. And what you've got here is that there's large parts of Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria and South Australia. That's a major agricultural district into here, all right? That's somewhere between the 300 and 500% of normal range. So 3 to 5 times normal rainfall this month. And it's been very problematic for spring crops and the harvesting of winter crops. So we'll keep you up to date on all of this, and I will talk to you again next week. Have a good one. Thanks.